Welcome to the Only Male Cruise Show, the podcast. I am the only Male Cruise. Be sure to hit the like button, share, subscribe, replay gang, leave a comment. You know I want to hear from you. Copyright disclaimer regarding fair use is in full effect. The views and opinions expressed in this show, you guessed it, they're all mine. Let's go to work. All right, welcome to the Only Male Cruise Show, the podcast. I'm sorry, y'all. I hadn't realized that my microphone was off. But what I was saying was, hit the like button. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. All right. Before I get started into the transcripts, I wanted to ask all of you, if you would, to make a donation and participate in this transcript fundraiser. Okay, myself and Just Jazz Only YouTube channel, we're working together to pull the funds together for the transcripts. None of the transcripts are available the day of the testimony. So we're asking if you will make a donation to the Cash App that you see above Just Jazz Beautiful Picture, or you can donate to the Cash App that you see scrolling through the ticker. That's mine, whichever one makes you feel more comfortable. And so what I was going to do was just read all of the opening statements, but it's a little lengthy, and I know people have other things to do. So I'm just going to break them down per the legal representative. So right now we are on Bonjean's opening statement, and I think we're going to get somewhere with all that, okay? So let's get right into it. Oh, wait, but before I do that, I want to check out some Twitter, because somebody came through the last one talking about Minor One got on the stand and said, "Nah, it wasn't me. That wasn't me in the video." So we're just going to check Twitter real quick before I get into these opening statements, because Minor One is actually testifying. She was on the stand earlier. Looks like, according to Jason Meisner on Twitter, Jane says she told no one about her and Kel's relationship because he told her as soon as they started having sex to keep it a secret and not to share it with anyone. Says she was 14 at the time. She wanted to share it with her friends, but she didn't. And it looks like some of the questions on the stand were, did Mr. Kelly ever record you two engaged in sexual activity? Her answer is yes. When did it start? She says, when I was 14. So trust and believe, those transcripts, the full detail of that testimony is going to be available tomorrow. We're definitely going to bring it to you. Please hit the Cash Apps and help us on this fundraiser. So enough of that. Let's get into this. All right, Bonjean's opening statement. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to take 1 minute to reintroduce myself and my team and my client. My name is Jennifer Bonjean. My law firm is the Bonjean Group. It is based in New York City. We have a satellite office here in Chicago. My partner is Ashley Cohen. My associate or our associate is Diane O'Connell, and our client is Mr. Robert Kelly, who we proudly represent. Get him, Bonjean. Now, we want to thank you for your service. It is not lost on us the sacrifice that you're making, and it is a lengthy trial. The government, as you heard, has a long narrative story that they intend to try to prove, and there's going to be a lot of people that come forward to testify. So it's going to take us some time. All right. So we appreciate your presence, and we also want to thank you because our system of justice depends on the bravery of people like you. And make no mistake about it, some measure of bravery will be required by you because this is a challenging case. It is a challenging case, first of all, because very few of you came in here as a blank state. Most of you, perhaps all of you, came in here with some knowledge, some information about my client. And in most cases across the country in courtrooms in this building and courtrooms everywhere, that doesn't happen. You walk into a courtroom, you don't know what the case is, you don't know who the defendant is, you don't know what the charges are, you have no information about the person who is on trial, the accused, and you come in with a fresh set of eyes. Mr. Kelly doesn't get that. He has no choice because of information that's in the public domain to have a jury that comes in with information about him, about allegations against him. And some of you probably know, and the government mentioned it, you're familiar with him as this Grammy Award winning R&B singer, but many of you have indicated that you were familiar with certain ugly allegations against him. And you also heard going through jury selection that not everybody was cut out for the job that you have. Lots of people said, I can't do it. I cannot be fair and impartial, but not all of you. You said you could. You promised you could. And we're going to hold you to it because the Constitution guarantees my client a fair and impartial jury and a fair and impartial process. The Constitution guarantees that for all of us, even your loved ones. There is no R. Kelly exception. He gets that guarantee too. And that doesn't mean that we simply fake it or we just give it the old college try. He is entitled to a non-biased jury, and that is a tall order. It's a tall order, but you all said you could do it, and we commend you for that. You were chosen because of that, and that is what the law requires. And make no mistake, Mr. Kelly is not looking for any special treatment, no special consideration. He only asks what the law requires, and that is that you consider the evidence in this courtroom that comes in through this courtroom. That's it. And that you judge each and every witness through the same lens, a lens unclouded by what you think you may know about him or what you've heard on the streets or what you may have heard in a headline or what you may have heard in a docuseries. And importantly, that you consider every single one of those counts, all 13 of them that the government put up. You consider them separately and determine whether the government has met its burden for each element of each offense, for each 13 counts, period. And that's a big ask, but you said you could do it, and we're grateful to have you. And we believe you will. And we believe if you do your job, you will reach the just and righteous verdict, and it will be a verdict of not guilty. Let me swing over to the chat real quick. I want to appreciate all of y'all for coming back. Hit the like button, share, subscribe if you haven't already. Shout out to Lysandra Gilly, girl, we all we got. Shout out to the #1 mod, Baby Shay in the house. Yeah, I appreciate y'all very much. Y'all be sure to hit the like button, share the show. All right. Let's get back into Bonjean. I'm loving her energy right now. All right, so Bonjean goes on further to say, now, you heard the government depict Mr. Kelly literally as a monster, essentially. That's really what you heard. And they believe that their evidence is going to show that he's a serial child sexual abuser. That's what they believe. And it is true that Mr. Kelly is imperfect. It is true that on his journey from poverty to stardom, that he stumbled along the way. We won't deny that. That is what humanity is about. Sometimes people do stumble along the way, and it's important. And as the government pointed out, literally overnight, Mr. Kelly went from being a high school dropout singing in the subways to a mega superstar who was marketed as a sex symbol. That was his story, and he was ill equipped. We are not going to tell you that he was equipped to handle that. Many celebrities haven't been. And because he was a high school dropout, because he had literacy issues, because he couldn't read and write, he had to rely on people. He had to rely on a lot of people for support, for help, for guidance. And Mr. McDavid was one of his managers. That's true. Mr. McDavid was someone who worked with Mr. Kelly for a long time and who assisted him in understanding the world. And I bring this up not because anything about Mr. Kelly's life is some type of defense to the charges that the government is bringing, but it is important when the government wants to paint him as a monster that you remember that we are talking about a human being and that we implore you to keep those emotions in check because you promised you would. You would not let sympathies and bias and emotion, that you would be technicians. That's what you need to be in this case because we're talking about some pretty heavy stuff. All right? Now, as you have likely gathered from the government's opening, it has brought what I would call a hodgepodge of charges against him that largely date back a quarter century, 25 years ago. Even charges for which he's already faced prosecution in 2008, charges for which he was acquitted of. And the government, who professes to care about justice for all of the alleged child victims that they have referenced, have waited 2 decades, over 2 decades to bring this case in a mob justice climate where hashtag movements tell us what we should and should not believe, and where prosecutions are built around docuseries and social media movements. But that's not what we're here to do. Again, you are technicians. You are here to listen to the evidence. And while the government may think this is a very simple and straightforward case, it is for them. Their goal is for you just to say, he's a really bad guy. So therefore, guilty. But that's not what your oath requires. Your oath requires that you look at each and every single count and determine whether he committed each element of that count by proof beyond a reasonable doubt. I do want to talk about the evidence a little bit. I'm not going to overwhelm you with a narrative that you couldn't possibly begin to follow because the evidence comes from the witness stand. It doesn't come from attorneys' mouths. And the government, what they presented to you is just what they believe the evidence is going to show. It's not evidence. And frankly, neither are my words. My words is not evidence. But what the evidence appears to be, the government told you that they expect, that they will show you video clips. Now, it sounds as if there's going to be all these video clips. There's going to be 3 video clips. 3. They've charged him with 4, but the 4th one doesn't exist, and it never existed. They're going to present 3 video clips, and I'm going to take all the mystery out of this for you. They are sexually explicit. They are graphic, okay? They are meant to shock and awe you. They are going to force us to watch way more than we all want to watch. I guarantee it. You will need all of 10 seconds to look at these videos to know exactly what. And then the government jumps in and says, could we have a sidebar, Your Honor? So they had a sidebar, but unfortunately, all that has been redacted. So sidebar ends and Bonjean is back on the case. So Bonjean says, so as I was saying, you're going to see video. It will take you all of 10 or 15 seconds to recognize it's sexually explicit. We're not disputing that. It is sexually explicit. However, the tapes really have no evidentiary value unless someone can come in and authenticate them, unless someone is going to come in and tell you what it means and what it is. Now, the government says that Jane, who is now nearly 40 years old, is going to come in and identify herself and Mr. Kelly in these video clips. She's going to take the oath according to the government and say that she was, I think, 14 years old or 15, I think 14, and that she and Robert engaged in this sexual behavior and that it was video recorded. We'll have to see if that bears out, because for the last 22 years, she has adamantly denied that it was her in that video. Before there was any criminal investigation, she denied it. She denied it repeatedly to prosecutors, to social workers, to police officers. She denied it under oath to a grand jury. And you know who else denied it? Her parents. We're calling them Brandon and Susan. I'm not sure. That's just the pseudonyms they're going by. It's not their real names, but that's what we're calling them. And they, too, denied it to police officers, to law enforcement, to prosecutors, to a grand jury. They took an oath. They promised to tell the truth, and they denied it. Now, you heard the government's explanation for these denials is that Mr. Kelly had this Sengali grip on this family for what, 20 years? That's what their theory is. That he used some type of influence and I guess employed the father. That's their theory. That for 2 decades, that's what they did. Well, ladies and gentlemen, you're going to have to decide whether that makes much sense at all. It's not a secret that Mr. Kelly had a relationship with Jane's family. This is not a very long-standing relationship. In fact, I'm pretty sure that 4 of Mr. Kelly's albums or songs for which he was either nominated or received Grammys, Jane's father was one of those as a guitarist, was on those as a guitarist. In fact, Mr. Kelly maintained a relationship with these people up until, well, his arrest, 2019. They came to his birthday parties. They corresponded. They were friends. This is a legitimate relationship that lasted for decades, long after Mr. Kelly was acquitted in 2008, long after Mr. Kelly feared that there would be some prosecution. This was a long-standing, legitimate relationship that went on for years. The government has suggested in their opening, and presumably there will be testimony that this was just a 2-decade-long obstruction conspiracy. No. The evidence will not bear that out. You'll see pictures of Mr. Kelly and Jane's brother, who was a drummer. I mean, this was a relationship with an entire family that lasted for a long time. And true, yeah, it is true that sometimes Mr. Kelly would assist this family with some money here and there over the course of 20 years, but long after there was any fear of prosecution. Let's not forget, Mr. Kelly was acquitted. He didn't fear prosecution. Now, the question is, why is Jane coming forward now, all these years later? Well, only Jane can answer that. But we do know one thing. She, to the government, didn't mention that, but she, too, is testifying under a grant of immunity. What does that mean? Well, a grant of immunity is a deal with the government. Why does Jane need a deal with the government? Well, according to Jane's counsel, her attorneys, she believes her statements and whatever statements she made to the government are self-incriminating, would incriminate her in crimes. What those crimes are? Well, again, we'll have to wait to hear from Jane on that. We do know one potential crime is that she testified under oath falsely, but that's perjury. But there might be other crimes. But we do know that the government has promised her that so long as she comes in here and testifies, well, they say truthfully, but they get to decide what the truth is, that she will never be prosecuted for those offenses. And guess what? Jane's mother, who you're going to hear from, she's got a deal too. Or at least she agreed what is known as a proffer agreement, that she could make statements without fear of those statements being used against her. Why do these people need immunity deals? Well, that's the type of information that we'll have to hear from the witness stand. And that type of information will be important for you assessing the credibility of all of the charges. You're going to have to decide whether these video clips are authentic. As I mentioned, we're talking about two VCR tapes here. There's the one that was the subject of the 2008 prosecution that has one clip on it. And then there's another videotape that the government mentioned. It has two other clips on it. And this is the one that came through. Goodness gracious, Chuck, Charles, Freeman, Keith Morrell, Lisa. These are the individuals that had this tape squirreled away, apparently for 20 years. And only in 2019 does this tape reemerge. Now, let me take a break here and hit the chat, see what y'all talking about. Bonjean starting off good. Ooh, wee. Shout out to Island Browning, another number one mod in the house. Y'all do like Island Browning say. Linda Alexander, hey girl, thanks for pulling up. Thanks for making a donation. We appreciate y'all. Hit that Cash App, y'all. Help us keep these transcripts coming, okay? Just the tea, please, in the house. Y'all know I appreciate y'all pulling up. Be sure to hit the like button, share, subscribe if you haven't already. Too Persuasive on deck. Y'all be sure to follow Too Persuasive under Gems and Jams right here on YouTube. Y'all appreciate y'all support. All right. Tell me what y'all think in the chat. Is Bonjean starting off good? Because I think she is. All right. So she said, yeah, this tape reemerges in 2019. Okay. All right, y'all, I had to take a sip. All right. And Charles Freeman, who is a criminal. Charles Freeman, who is an extortionist. Charles Freeman, who spent a significant amount of time trying to enrich himself off Mr. Kelly by extorting him and blackmailing him. That is the story. And he brings forward this tape after 2019, represented by an attorney who is also a criminal? Yeah. You will learn that Michael Avenatti represented Mr. Freeman. Michael Avenatti is in prison right now for fraud. Freeman is testifying under a grant of immunity too. Come in here and say all those bad things about Mr. Kelly, and you get no trouble for your extorting, for your blackmailing, for all those things you did to enrich yourself. Who else? Lisa, who the government says stole a videotape, took a videotape because she was on it. This is the videotape you're never going to see, by the way, because, well, it doesn't exist, and it never existed. But Lisa did take some videotapes from Mr. Kelly, and Mr. Kelly will not deny that he did sometimes record his sexual activities. You know, I should point out that Mr. Kelly, I'm not here to defend his moral character or defend his sexual proclivities when it comes to the amount of partners he has or anything of that nature, okay? And when you go back to the jury room eventually, you're not going to be asked to decide whether he is a good or bad person, okay? That's for social media. You can hold those thoughts, and that's something that you can maybe communicate there. But in here, the only question is whether he committed the charged offenses. But you're going to hear, you already heard it. The government told you about this wild chase, this mission that, frankly, I couldn't follow it. But you have Lisa Van Allen, Keith Morrell, her boyfriend, and Charles Freeman. And what you need to know is that they're criminals. They extorted Mr. Kelly. And the government says, objection, argumentative. And Bonjean says, the evidence is going to show that all three of them have immunity deals. The government says something. The court reporter says, microphone, please. The judge jumps in and says, the objection, that it's argumentative. Well, it's possibly a statement of fact. So I don't know, overruled. All right, Judge Harry. Judge Harry. Bonjean said, "Thank you, Your Honor." And she continues. Lisa, Keith, and Chuck. Yeah, Lisa did take tapes. She didn't take it because, and the evidence will show that she did not take any tape because she was worried about her sexual activities with Mr. Kelly getting out into the public domain. No, no, no. She took those tapes. And again, they acknowledge that she was an adult. She took those tapes to shake them down. That's what she did. Because why? If she took it, where is it? If you're so worried about it getting out there, if you took it, where is it? Why did you send it off to some guy? And what you're going to find out is after these people took these tapes, they reproduced them and they put it into the public domain. They are child pornographers. That's what they are. They are the ones that made copies and enriched themselves off tapes, off sexually explicit tapes. That's what they did. And I should say, we don't even know what all the tapes that Lisa took from Mr. Kelly. Now, you're also going to hear evidence. Well, let me just back up to one thing. You'll have to decide whether you believe these people. You'll have to decide, okay, whether any of these people are worth a shred of believability, okay? Whether they deserve any ounce of credibility. Because in order to find my client guilty of some type of obstruction, and frankly, to find any of the defendants guilty of some type of obstruction, you're going to have to credit 3 individuals with immunity deals where they get to come up here, and as long as they say what the government believes to be the truth, they are clear and free of all criminal charges for their criminal conduct. Now, I want to talk about the government's charges that they added to this indictment. These enticement charges of these other women, they too are all going by pseudonyms. And I don't want to get it wrong. These are not their real names, but these are individuals named Nia, Tracy, Pinky, Brittany. You heard about these. These 4 now women. You won't see any videotapes involving these women, and you will have to decide from their testimony whether you believe them when they say that they had sexual relationships with Mr. Kelly when they were underage. But I want to get into a little bit of what what we know their testimony will show. One of them, Tracy, the evidence will show is that she now claims that she was underage. She's going to testify that she was 16 years old when she had some type of sexual relationship with Mr. Kelly. That's what the government told you. It's going to be contradicted by the fact that she sued Mr. Kelly years ago and said that she was 17 and did not claim she was underage. And in Illinois, the age of consent is 17 for sexual activity. 17 is the age of consent. So let's get this straight. You will have to decide whether you believe that when she goes to sue Mr. Kelly for money, she would say she's older than she actually was. No, she's moved back her age. That's what the evidence is going to show. You're also going to see that she told investigators that she was a woman in a still photo from a video that came into the possession of law enforcement. There's a number of videos, and this is a video of a grown woman, a consenting woman, not a woman who has made any allegation against Mr. Kelly. I'm not going to say what her name is because it's irrelevant, and frankly, she doesn't deserve that. Let me come to the chat real quick. Trying to see what's tea. Yeah, I do like Baby Shay say. Okay, so Too Persuasive. You think she's off to a great start? I do too. She's hitting it. We love Bonjean. It was VHS. I should have destroyed it. It doesn't make sense to ship the tapes off. Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. But this Tracy tried to tell the government that it was her. Okay. Oh, that's me. That's me. I believe that's me. Well, she had to eventually admit, no, that wasn't me, actually. That's the type of testimony we're dealing with. Pinky and Brittany, they too tried to extort Mr. Kelly. They tried to extort him for $35,000 and say essentially, we know you've had these legal problems, and we're going to go out there and say that you did that to us if you don't give us $35,000. That's what the evidence is going to show. It's called extortion. And I'm not saying that Mr. Kelly didn't have sex with Pinky or Brittany, but they weren't minors. Now, as I said earlier, the government has laid out what they believe their case will be. And they have depicted a very ugly picture of Mr. Kelly. Really, a picture of someone with bad character. That's what they've laid out for you. And they are hoping that you will not be technicians that you need to be, but that you will assume that because maybe that's not fair. They're hoping, but here's the risk. You cannot. The law does not allow you to assume that because if you conclude that he's a bad guy, that he has done some bad things, that he must have done these other bad things. The law does not allow that. We try counts, offenses, not people's character. And it can get very muddy, and it can get very difficult to keep those things straight. But I'm going to implore you, because you promised that you will do your very best to keep those things straight. It's entirely improper, and you will get the law from the judge. So I'm not going to belabor that. But you cannot just say, I think the government met its burden on this count. Therefore, everything else they say, they met their burden on. No. You have to look at each one separately and decide whether, in fact, the government has met its burden as to each count, because it is entirely possible that in the climate that Mr. Kelly could also be a victim. He can, of exploitation, financial exploitation, extortion, those things as well, because there are strong motivators out there. So it is important that you do your job. Because, ladies and gentlemen, the government's case really does hinge on the testimony of liars, extortionists, people who engaged in the business of trafficking pornography. And frankly, if you believe the government's story, parents themselves who engaged in sex trafficking, that those are their witnesses. That's their case. So I would ask you, ladies and gentlemen, to remember that sometimes people may do a bad thing. It doesn't mean they're all bad, and it doesn't mean that everything they do is bad. And on the flip side, there are a lot of good people that do good things, and it doesn't mean that everything they do is good. Mr. Kelly welcomes this case and implores you to look at the evidence and to make a decision on each count separately, and not to just throw your hands up in the air and say, he seems like a pretty bad guy. Because if you do that, you will not be upholding your end of the bargain. But we believe you will. And we believe that you will reach the right verdict at the end of this case. And I thank you for your time. And then the judge jumps in and says, we will now take a 15-minute recess, and then we'll hear from Darrell's attorney. And so then, of course, that's what happens. Now, the state... So the judge says the jurors are on their way up, so please gather. And the government says, Judge, there's a few things I'd like to address with you before the jury comes back in. Judge says, go ahead. The government is saying one thing, just I'd ask that you re-admonish the gallery. There was some noise in certain corners of the courtroom during discussions on objections and about when me and Miss Bonjean were pre-reviewing the evidence. I just ask you to remind everyone to be quiet or step out. There's something that's being said or whatever that's going to draw a reaction. That would be thing one. Thing two, and I don't have the exact quote, but at some point during Bonjean's opening, she said the words to the effect of that the jury could go on social media, share their thoughts about certain things. I just ask that you admonish the jury again that they don't. She did not say when. I don't think she suggested that they could do that today, but just remind the jury they're not to go on social media. They're not to do any sort of investigating or anything like that. Bonjean says, I think, and then the judge says, I don't recall that. I don't recall that latter comment. However, if again, it's difficult for me to hear this judge. It's difficult for me to hear what's going on over in the corner because this is a pretty big courtroom. But if there are comments, please do refrain from it, particularly any kind of emotional comments or laughing or anything like that. Just if you're here as an observer. So please act that way. Otherwise, we may have to remove people who disobey that. Okay? So that was Bonjean's opening. I'm going to come over here to the chat. Now, y'all can tell me because I can always change the thumbnail, all right? But I could just jump right on into Darrell's attorney's opening. Y'all tell me in the chat what y'all want me to do. Tell me what y'all want me to do. Y'all be sure to hit the like button, share, subscribe if you haven't already. Tell me, y'all. Say something in the chat. All right. Well, y'all not telling me to do it, and y'all not telling me not to do it. Lasandra Gilla said either one. Okay. Well, you know what? I'm just going to stick with the program. I will keep this a good, short little video. That way everybody can get right onto it. So, that's it. That's a podcast. Y'all know I'm coming right back, though. Be sure to hit the like button, share, subscribe, replay gang. Leave a comment. You know I want to hear from you. Don't forget, y'all. Make a donation if you can. Help us to keep these transcripts coming. We definitely going to be here tomorrow with the testimony that's going on today. We know we got Lasandra, why was I getting ready to say your name? We about to do, Rashonda is on the stand right now. Matter of fact, before we leave, let me go to Twitter real quick and see if there's any updates that I can bring you since we all happen to be here right now. Stand fast. Let's see what we're working with. Let's see here. What's T in the Twitter sphere? Let me see. I'm going to hit this quick refresh. What you talking about, Jason Meisner? Let's see here. Let me see what our boy talking about. If anything, if he got anything. Here we go. Let's see. Okay, asked why she had sex with Kels, Jane says it was out of intimidation. He was an authoritative figure. I didn't know how to respond. I didn't know how to say no. I just went along with things and it somewhat became normal. Says here, Jane says she started to have feelings for Kels, so she went along with his request to include her friends. I was thinking I was in love at the time, and I was being submissive. I wanted to give him what he wanted, and I didn't want to make him feel like I wasn't cooperative. Boy, this sounds like such a soap opera. Yeah, I can't wait. I can't wait to find out when they say, well, what took you so long? And remember, AUSA Kroll has been subpoenaed, and no motion in hell can stop or bar that subpoena. So that's going to be real interesting. All right, y'all. I'm coming back next with Darrell's attorney's opening statements. So hit that bell, y'all, so y'all know when I come back. Thanks, Island Browning. Appreciate you so much. That's it, y'all. That is the podcast. Be sure to like, share, subscribe. Replay gang, you know what time it is. Leave a comment. You know I want to hear from you. And until next time, y'all, we will see you when we see you. Welcome to the Only Male Cruise Show, the podcast. I am the Only Male Cruise. Be sure to hit the like button, share, subscribe, replay gang, leave a comment. You know I want to hear from you. Copyright disclaimer regarding fair use is in full effect. The views and opinions expressed in this show, you guessed it, they're all mine. Let's go to work.